Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. Have some exciting things I want to go over today before we jump into the bulk of today's episode. As you'll see from the title, we're going to be talking about some general deck building ideas, tips, tools, etc. But before we jump into that, I just want to go over the announcement that came from Ben Brode and Second Dinner yesterday as a time of recording, August 2nd. I'm just going to read through the statement. I want to make sure I capture the full thought here. So Ben says, "Hey everyone, last week we removed Nexus events from the game. We have another update for you today. Let's just run it back and start over, eh? We're going to give back all the gold y'all spent on Nexus events. Whether you spent 360 or 36,000 gold, we're just going to dump that amount of gold back in your account with this next patch. Additionally, even if you didn't spend any gold, we'll be granting Jane Foster to everyone who doesn't already have her. Brand new accounts will find her in Pool 3. I want to extend my personal thanks for providing your feedback and sticking with us as we continue to improve the game. We have big dreams for the future of Marvel Snap. We want to build a game that can stand the test of time. To do that, we'll be working on fair and fun ways we can add new cards to the game. As we test new monetization features, we'll be keeping in mind that we need to be providing value and creating a player-friendly experience. We don't have all the details quite yet, but we'll be hard at work until we do. Strong arm emoji." So obviously, we've been talking on the last several episodes about the patch notes, Nexus events, thoughts about Nexus events, thoughts about monetization, etc. It's kind of been a common theme over the last several episodes. And we did, we've known for a few days that they were going to tear out the Nexus events, which was surprising to me and I think surprising to others. I think a lot of people just expected a rework and adjustment of how much currency needed to be spent, etc. Because that's kind of been the typical thing that most other card games have done when there's been backlash. I think everybody was pleasantly surprised when they said, "Hey, no, we're going back to the drawing board. We're going to tear this out. We're going to start from scratch." So I think in a lot of ways, a lot of us felt like, okay, that's enough. We appreciate this. What I think we didn't expect was for them to refund all the gold. I think that is a big move in the right direction. Them showing that they are serious about taking fan feedback, that they're trying to make things right. They really are. It's not just lip service. They really do want to make a game that will stand the test of time. They want to do right by the fans, etc., etc. So very grateful to all of the minds over at Second Dinner, their willingness to do what's right for the fans, do what's right for the long-term health of the game, and go back to the drawing board and, refund the gold that was spent on this event as it is no longer part of the game. So very excited about that. I hope you are too. Please let me know your thoughts on Twitter at can't_stop_snap. But with that all being said, without further ado, let's jump into today's conversation. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. I am joined once again by a great co-host. Today I am joined by Tobimaro. Tobimaro has been very active in the official Discord for Marvel Snap. He's been posting content on his YouTube. He's been active on Twitter with the game, and he's just been creating a lot of great content and a lot of great discussion around the game. Tobimaro, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've heard this podcast, I think, since it started. I really enjoy it, and I'm really glad that you considered me for joining.
Yeah, no problem. We are glad to have you here. So today we are going to be diving into some topics around deck building, just some strategy around deck building, some just high-level concepts of what you should approach, how this is maybe different than other collectible card games, trading card games, etc., and some of the paradigm shifts there. But before we dive into that, Tobimaro, I just want to give you a second, just kind of high-level. What's your background with games? How did you first learn about Marvel Snap? And what just high-level what you think about the game and what makes you excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I started to play card games maybe when I was 10 years old or so, when I was at second or third grade, I don't remember. But yeah, that was a long time ago since I'm 32 years old right now. My first one was Pokemon cards. I even got a foil Charizard at the time. But then a neighbor of mine stole it, so I'm still sad about that.
Classic.
Yeah. I tried Digimon as well, then moved to Magic. And I also played a lot of video games, card game, based on card games like Digital Card Battle on PS1 and Yu-Gi-Oh on GBA. And then fast forward to 2013, when Hearthstone launched, I played it for a bit. I didn't like it very much. Moved away to Scrolls. I don't know if you know that game, but it was a card game from Mojang, the developers for Minecraft. But it died pretty quickly. It didn't have much success, sadly. I really love that game. Then I went back to Hearthstone to give it a second chance. I played it non-stop until Journey to Ungoro or Cobalt and Catacombs. Then got tired of it again. Never got to Legend though. And then I played Magic Arena, Runeterra for a bit, but it didn't grab my attention. Then I played some Metal Battlers. I really got in deep into Dota Underlords. That failed as well, so I hope I'm not bringing bad luck to this game. Then I moved back to Hearthstone Battlegrounds for a bit. Then I don't think I played any more card games until Marvel Snap. I really got excited when it was announced, mainly because of Ben Brode, because I really wanted to see what he could do after Hearthstone. And I really think he and his team innovated a lot with gameplay, especially. So I hope the game succeeds, even though they are having some problems right now with monetization and all that. But I really hope the gameplay speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, totally. Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I agree with what you said about bad luck. I don't think you will. I don't think you're a bad luck charm. But that is, it's always hard to enjoy games, and then, some games kind of last for a long time. Other games kind of die out. And so I think we both hope that Marvel Snap is here for the long run. And we obviously know that's what the developers want. But like you said, time will tell how things play out. So with all that being said, thank you for kind of that introduction to your background. I think you bring kind of a lot of knowledge of how, you've played a lot of card games basically, right? So you kind of know, you've built decks in a lot of different structures, a lot of different deck sizes, etc. So that'll be interesting to kind of bring to the conversation today. So we kind of have a couple of high level topics we want to cover, and we may go off on some tangents depending on where the conversation goes. But this first idea that I've just kind of been throwing around, I want to talk about is kind of this idea of building around an archetype versus building around a specific card. I'm not saying those are the only two options, but I kind of feel like that's kind of the way I approach things so far in Marvel Snap. I guess, something to just state for listeners who still may not be familiar, if you're not playing the game yet, Marvel Snap is unique in the fact that your deck is only 12 cards. Most card games, right? Your deck is 30, 40, 50, 60 cards, right? And so with Marvel Snap, you don't have any duplicates of cards. It's really, you're building just a combination of 12 individual cards. And, every game you draw, depending on the locations, etc. But on a normal game, you draw 9 of those 12 cards. You draw 75% of your deck. So really, you're trying to build consistency, right? Where you can have 3/4 of your deck drawn every game, and that you're going to be able to get what you need to win. So kind of going back to the topic. So this kind of idea of building around an archetype. Sometimes I approach it where I'm like, I want to build a move deck, or I want to build a discard deck, or I want to build a destroy deck, or I kind of want to build an interruption control deck, right? Where I kind of throw my opponent off, right? How do you, when you're building around an archetype, Tobimaro, like, how do you approach it? Do you say, okay, I want to build a move deck, and then where do you go from there? Do you pick a specific card to build around at that point, or do you try to build, pick 2 or 3 cards and then build around? What's kind of your strategy for building around an archetype?
Yeah, I experiment a lot, so I don't shy away from trying stuff that don't work, or at first sight it doesn't work. So if I just want to play a discard list, I put all the discard cards there. I don't think too much about it. I usually jump into a game, see what works and what doesn't, and then make adjustments based on that. So I try not to be too focused on making it work at the first time. I just go with an open mind and try to play a lot of things, even though if they don't synergize as well. But then when I play the game with the awful deck I just made, without any considerations, I start to see some synergies between cards. And those are the ones that I try to build around. So even if I start to build a deck around a specific archetype or a specific keyword, then I move to to make some key cards that I found are better to make them work with each other. So that's how I approach deck building. Um,
Yeah, no,
Mostly
that
when
that makes
about archetypes. Yeah.
yeah. I would say that I've approached it pretty similarly in the sense of going after an archetype, right? I usually do my filter. I'm like, okay, I want everything that has discard, right, or everything that has destroy, and then I kind of just look at the list and right, if there's more than 12 cards available, right, I just kind of like, well, these ones seem like the best combination to start, right? I usually don't put too much thought if I'm just experimenting, trying something new. I kind of throw it in there too, and I try out. And I think you kind of nailed it on the head. You start to see some synergies really by playing. You can kind of theorize, but like the game is so easy to build a deck around. I think it's less stressful than other games when you only have to put 12 cards in, right? I've played Legends of Runeterra, some other games, and when I have to put like 40 cards in there or more, I kind of start to be like, well, is it better to put 2 of this one or 3 of this one or none of this one, right? With this, it's kind of like you can just really throw together some cards. Yes, it may not be the best, but there's still a possibility you may win a game or some games, right? Even if you've kind of just thrown a group together. So I'd agree with that. And then when I start playing with it, then you start to see, okay, these 2 or 3 cards, these play really well together. And that can kind of help you to identify a core of cards. Like that's your win con, if you will, right? Would you agree kind of is that how it goes for you?
Yeah, I think that's how it goes for me. And also to jump on that topic about comparing the deck building on Snap to other games. On other card games, I was never much of a deck builder. I I just I think the having more than one copy in a deck, I think just got me away from it. And also, like on other games, you could target cards to buy or to craft, and for that you would need to get an idea before making your own deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to build a deck. I'll see the list that I want. I'll buy those cards, or I'll buy packs to target them or craft them or whatever. But on on the other hand, on Marvel Snap, I think it's the opposite. You get cards. Since you can target the cards that you want, you are really rewarded for experimenting, and since the beginning. So when you begin the game, you are forced to deck build. You get one card at a time. You swap one card or another, and since the beginning, you really get the feeling that it's easy to deck building this game, and it's one of the features that I really enjoy the most about Marvel Snap is how you can just throw some cards together and see if it works or not. Yeah, and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with. I hadn't really thought about it in those words you just said, but I couldn't agree more. Right, like when I used to play Legends and Runeterra a lot. Right, I wouldn't call myself a professional deck builder. Right, there's some people that's just their hobby. They love just creating decks, theorizing decks. Right, and I usually would find somebody's deck. Right, a deck build that somebody had posted online, and maybe I'd make a slight adjustment to it. But then I'm like, okay, I'm going to use all my resources in the game to buy those cards, right? To target those cards, right? And that's what I'd be targeting, right? And so it's like I kind of like play my non-ideal deck until I could get that. With Marvel Snap, now I know there's pros and cons to this, and some people maybe feel more negatively towards it or than others, right? But without being able to target specific cards, it really drives you to experiment, right? It's like you're given what you're given, and you can kind of with each new card you can try something a little different, and I've really enjoyed that. Yes, there's been moments where I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have I would have drawn a different card than the one I just opened. But I would say more often than not, right, higher than 50% of the time, I don't know exactly the percentage, I get a card and then I try it out. I test around it, I play around it, and I enjoy that, right? It drives me to do things where in other card games there's hundreds or over 1,000 cards, and I play with a very small subset of those, right? Where with every card I've unlocked so far, I've used it at least once, right? And I just don't feel like you can do that in every card game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Also,
Um,
also you
Go
get
ahead. Go
to.
ahead.
I don't think there are like really bad cards in this game. So yeah, there are some that you just can't see yourself playing, but even the cards that are not optimal, like Cyclops or Shocker or something like that, you have cards like Patriot that give them like a little boost. And even if you're not playing the most powerful deck, you can still have fun by playing some meme decks or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, people will post pictures on the Facebook group or on Reddit. They'll be like, oh man, I opened Wasp, right? And I mean, they have a point, right? Wasp is a 0 cost, 1 power card, but we all know that Wasp works great with Lockjaw, right? So yes, maybe it doesn't have like a ton of use to you if you only have that one card, but I agree with you. I don't think any card is useless. I think there are some cards that can be kind of standalone and you can build around a card, and others you need a combination or 2 or 3 cards, and then it becomes a powerful combination, right?
Yeah, and like you said, that when you get a card, most of times you try to build around it, and I think that's that's what I do as well. When I unlock a card, I try to make something work, even though it's really difficult to make Baron Mortar work. I still try it, and even if I don't make a deck that works, or a deck that's not fun, you still get the feeling for the synergies there, and you might even discover other cards that you never thought of playing before, and you can go from there and build another deck based on some interaction that you just put for a deck that the only objective was to experiment.
Yeah, no, totally. So we've kind of already covered it, but this idea of building around a specific card, right? Like sometimes you open a card and it's like, okay, this fits more into a synergy. But like when you open a card like Patriot, right? You kind of brought up Patriot, right? Patriot buffs cards without effects. Then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I want to build a Patriot deck, right? So you kind of start to build around the card. It's not necessarily a certain archetype. It's not like a move deck, right? It's a Patriot deck. Like Patriot is kind of the win con, right? So I think that's interesting, right? It kind of has a mix of both, right? Which I like. I like being able to do, okay, I'm just going to play into an archetype. People who have played card games, you're familiar with that, right? Like this is a burn deck or, an aggro deck, right? These kinds of ideas. Or you're going to kind of build around a specific card that kind of has synergy with other cards. So that's something I like. But jumping kind of to another topic, I'd love to jump into this idea of snapping and when to snap. People talk about this mechanic we've talked about in the podcast multiple times, right? You can't talk about Marvel Snap without kind of the snap idea, but we haven't really gone super deep into it. And I think there's a science to it often, right? And I think there's kind of maybe some tips and tricks to kind of always use with snapping, but then I think it changes depending on the deck you're using, right? And let me go into that a little bit. I guess my experience, I'm assuming your experience has been the same, right? If you don't snap the whole game and you wait till turn 6 and it's obvious that you are winning or that your opponent's winning, and if either of you snap when it's obvious they're going to win, like you can just tell there's no way the other person has a chance, you're going to retreat, right? And that leaves it so that you're really just getting 1 cube, right? You're playing for 1 cube at that point if you don't snap until turn 6. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, it has. And sometimes I think it's better not to snap even when you know you are winning, just so you can get those 2 cubes instead of the 1. Because if you snap,
Yes.
they will just retreat. But if you don't, maybe they'll see that out, right? Just 2 cubes. They might want to end the game like that, and you get 1 more cube than expected.
That's 100% been my experience, right? It's like I get to the point in turn 6 and I'm like, oh man, I should have snapped last turn, right? Because then you're already at 2 and maybe they'll hold out for the 4, right? But I'm like, I know if I snap now, they're just going to retreat, right? So it's kind of this mind game of when do you snap, right? And I feel like I've missed out on a lot of speed in my kind of climbing the ranks as I've tried to master this technique, right? But I agree with you. I mean, that's my strategy, right? If I get to turn 6, I haven't snapped, they haven't snapped, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to win. A lot of times I actually won't snap, right? Because I'd rather shoot for the 2 cubes than the 1. So I'd say that's kind of a high level general topic on snapping. Another thing I wanted to kind of get your opinion on is, so let's say you're obviously not waiting to turn 6. Like, what do you need to see to feel confident snapping in the first half of the game, turns 1, 2, or 3? Like, what normally, like, are you looking for? Are you looking for you've drawn all of the cards, or just that you have you're in a better place on the board, or like what combinations of things are you looking to snap early in the game?
Yeah, one thing that Trump said when the game was launched was that you should always think about snapping every turn of the game. So I think that it really is true. Every turn since turn one, you should think: do I snap now? Am I in a good position to win the game? So I think that's the first thing everyone should do, is to think about that. The other thing is that think about your hand. So if you're playing like a combo deck, if you have your full combo, or like if you have a really good chance of getting your full combo, I think you should snap as well. Or like you're playing a Mr. Negative deck and you have Mr. Negative before turn 4, and your 0 power cards are not on your hand, I think that you should snap as well. So there are multiple situations where if you have your win conditions, I think you should snap even though you are early in the game, like turn 1, 2, or 3. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't actually heard that comment from Trump, but that makes a lot of sense, right? I think, again, kind of going back to my experience, like I have missed out on lots of cubes, I think, because I just forget about considering the snap, right? I'm like really focused on like maybe the locations are kind of weird locations. It's a weird combination. I'm like, how does this play into my strategy, et cetera, right? So I kind of get caught up in that, and I just don't even think about it until it's near the end of the game, right? Where looking back on the game, obviously, hindsight is 2020, right? You're like, okay, I have all the information now. But if I had really kind of thought where I was on turn 2 or 3 and just looked at the board, looked at my cards, looked at what I had already played, what my opponent played, I probably would have snapped, right? But just by nature of me not thinking of that, I don't do it, right? And I think it stems, again, as we're talking about, we've all played so many other card games for so long, where kind of this betting multiplication system, right? Where you're bluffing your opponent and the stakes can be doubled, quadrupled, etc. It's just a paradigm shift for how we think, right? Ridiculous Hat, we had him on the podcast last week, and he said something that was interesting. He said, you're not playing for wins, you're playing for cubes, right? And I thought that was interesting because, again, playing card games, I think I think of playing to win. Now, obviously, he doesn't mean you're never trying to win, right? He just means that, if you're really trying to grow in the ranks, you're trying to rank up, get more rewards, etc., like you're playing for the matches that you can maximize your cube wins, right? Like in the matches where you're probably not going to win, we have this tendency to like want to know what's going to happen. Like, well, what are they going to play? What am I going to play? Like maybe there's a slight chance I could win, right? This kind of psychological, like I want to know what's going to happen next. And so that we stay in. And when I do that, which I do too often, I lose 2 cubes, I lose 4 cubes, and have, sometimes even I lose the very discouraging 8 cubes, which really feels bad when that happens, right? Yeah. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Kind of the psychology behind it, or just kind of this shift to the cube system from other card games?
Yeah, I think win rate in this game doesn't matter at all. So I think what matters is how many cubes you can get per game, because you can lose 7 games, and if you lose just 1 cube and you win an 8 cube game, you're in the positive, right? So I think it really matters how many cubes you can get. I think that's the thing you should aim for: get as many cubes as you can on every single game. That's why some decks that can get you, there are decks that win you more games, and there are decks that win you more cubes in a game, and there might be that their win rate is not as good as the others. But if you get like a really great turn 6 that your opponent is not expecting to do a big combo, that you most likely win 4 or 8 cubes on those situations, but you won't draw the win condition as often as with other decks. So I think that's something that you need to have in consideration. And I think a lot of the best decks nowadays are decks that make big plays on turn 6, like Death Wave, like the Dracula Apocalypse, stuff like that. And also, I think we can't forget about bots and bot games, because there are many cubes to be added on when playing against bots. And for playing against bots, you should have decks that they can't really cheat you with. Like, uh, bots are cheaters and they know what you play. So if you play, for example, Dracula, they can't play around that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally agree. You shared a lot of great thoughts there. I mean, with bots, yes. I mean, when I realize it's a bot, I feel a tendency to snap earlier if I feel like I'm in a good spot, because what I've noticed with the bots, right? Again, especially if you get to turn 6 and you snap, uh, and you're up, more often than not, they're going to retreat, right? But what I've noticed is, if I snap maybe turn 2, and then a bot is up maybe turn 4 or 5, they will snap. And then obviously 4 cubes are on the line at that point. And then if we go all the way to the end of turn 6, then there's 8 cubes, right? So I feel like there's definitely some opportunity to gain more cubes there. And I agree with you on what you said about kind of the turn 6 and where that's at, right? I think the game's still new, right? And they're letting in new beta players. Obviously, they just launched in the Philippines and Australia. Sorry, New Zealand and Australia just a couple weeks ago, right? And so there's still new players, and I think this will be a thing as more new players come into the game. People don't know to expect Death Wave yet if you're new to the game, right? Or they don't know to expect maybe like an Invisible Woman Hela, right? You've hidden all your discard cards, and then all of a sudden you're gonna resurrect all your cards on after turn 6, right? These big combos you're talking about, I think are really interesting. And but where I'm going with this is that players who've played a lot, like you and me, right? I can kind of see those combos coming, right? And I'm sure you can too. And so I guess it's less effective on human players that have played a while and kind of know the big turn 6 combos, right? So I think that's interesting. So I mean, it's easy to feel like we've all spent so many hours, so many days playing Marvel Snap now that it feels like, okay, this is what the meta will be like forever, or this is how it'll be. But obviously, as new cards get added, new combinations, and always a new influx of new players, I still think there's going to be room for kind of these big turn 6 combos. I don't know. Do you see that going away either through the developers nerfing things to like shy away from kind of the big turn 6, or do you feel like there's always going to be a place for big turn 6 type decks in the meta?
Well, ideally, I think I would want to have both. So I would want to have decks that are really good on making big turn 6 plays, and others that are more developing the board as you go along type of decks. If you have both, I think it's a more interesting method than just let's see who can do most on the last turn of the game. Also, I think the tech cards really matter a lot in this game, more than the others. So Magic or Shang-Chi or Rogue are some cards that can challenge that notion. So if you play Magic, your opponent will give you all the information because you will play everything they have. If you play Magic on turn 6, that is, then you can kind of counter that. Or yeah, Shang-Chi is really powerful as well. So yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but yeah, those big turn 6 plays I think matter a lot, and I think they should introduce even more counters to them, because right now initiative matters a lot.
Yes.
So if you don't control initiative as well, your deck cards might not work greatly.
Yeah, I just thought as we've been talking, I'm like brainstorming. Playing against, I've played against a lot of people that use a Visible Woman, right? So kind of the strategy is here, you lay Invisible Woman down, right? And then behind her, so she hides cards till the end of the game, after the game's over, right? So you throw down like a Hell Cow, you throw down like Blade, right, or Lady Sif, and then you also throw Hela, obviously, right? So the idea is that after the game ends, Invisible Woman then reveals the cards, and so you flip those over. You discard some really high cost cards and high power cards in your hand: Infinite, Hulk, Death, etc. Giganto, and then Hela resurrects all those, right? So it's very like big turn 6, right? Your opponent doesn't know what's coming. Do you know what I would love? I would love this. I haven't done this, but I'm like, how amazing would it be if you had Invisible Woman on your side, and or something, or like on turn 6 you lay down Cosmo at that location, and then they flip all their cards and Cosmo stops on reveal effects happening, and if just nothing happened, that would be so amazing. I haven't seen that interaction, but now I really want to do that because I think that would be an awesome counter. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I'd love to see even more counters. I hope we keep the balance between. I want there to be a balance. I want there to be great decks that you can build that really ramp up at the end of the game, and also ones that kind of just ramp from turn 1 and grow and grow and grow, right, where you're buffing the board throughout. Because I want variety, right? And I'm sure you do too. It's more fun when there's variety and not everybody's playing the same deck. You've played enough card games to know that it's kind of a death spell, I think, for popularity of certain card games when the meta is not handled very well. With that being said, I guess I want to ask you your opinion. How have you felt so far about Second Dinner's handling of buffs and nerfs to card? We've had a couple of patches now where they've done that. Do you feel like they're kind of overdoing it? They're doing too much? They're doing too little? How do you feel like they're doing right now?
Yeah, just to go back a bit about that Cosmo interaction with Invisible Woman. Yeah, I enjoy more. Enjoy Rogue. So if you rogue their Invisible Woman, you can also disrupt them before the turn 6.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that.
A deck that I'm really enjoying playing is like a Mr. Negative deck with lots of control, like Shang-Chi, Rogue. So those kind of can disrupt some of the most popular decks around, and that's really fun to play. But yeah, about the changes, I think the last patch, the changes were overshadowed by the Nexus event.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was much discussion about that, sadly, because I think all the changes were good. I don't see any of them that really sounded bad. So I think they are in a good direction. I think Kazoo decks were a problem in the meta. Everyone was playing them. There was the argument that, well, they just nerfed the decks that pull 1 and 2 players can play, right? I don't think that's really a problem because the new players will play against new players because matchmaking is based on collection level.
Yep.
So I don't feel that it's a problem. I think they made good changes. Well, aside from Ghost Rider, because I feel that Ghost Rider, it was this patch, right? The Ghost Rider nerf.
Yep. Yeah, where they moved it to a 4 cost. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sad about that because I think the problem was Lady Sif, not Ghost Rider. But yeah, aside from that, every change, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel that they've done a fairly good job. My example is that, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom about certain things sometimes. And obviously, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Reddit, if you're on Discord, with any game, there's always going to be people that are upset at any change, right? I'm not saying everybody in Marvel Snap, is a complainer. It's just there's going to be people that feel more strongly that things are changed for the worse, right? But I think Strong Guy, I think was something that people, everybody knew it was coming, but now people are saying, oh, well, he was such a key piece to decks I was playing with, right? And being able to rank up at a lower collection level. But I 100% agree with you. If you look at the big picture where they've changed matchmaking to now be off of collection level, I think it's okay. And I think the reality is I've still seen decks that have included Strong Guy in them since the change. Some people, the changes with like Jubilee, America Chavez, right? they're like, oh, well, now that's like not a great combo, but I still see people playing both cards, right? So it's like, I think that's how you can kind of tell if it's a healthy managing of the meta by the developer, if you will, and good buffs and nerfs, because cards, I don't feel like the cards are like all of a sudden not played by anybody, if that makes sense, right? I feel like maybe they're less played, but that's good. You want a variety, right? But I still think I don't think they're nerfing any cards to like the garbage where nobody's going to play them. I just think they're trying to make things more balanced. And then you take something like Scorpion. I mean, nobody played Scorpion, right? Before the patch, at least. I saw him in maybe like 1 or 2 matches ever. And then after the patch, maybe 15-20% of the decks are using Scorpion, right? So I think they've shown thus far that they can kind of responsibly handle buffing and nerfing the cards, and that they're going to kind of continue to create a healthy meta going forward. And it sounds like you would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the changes to Scorpion. I think it was a bad card before. Now it's a good one. And also, I just wished that they would buff more cards. So I think their attention is more on changing cards that are too broken or too used, or that their cube rates are better than the others. They buffed Scorpion. I wish they would buff like Baron Mordo and some other cards like Ronan. I think they don't have enough data to make those changes, and I wish they paid more attention for them. But yeah, I'm sure they will address them in the future.
Yeah, and that you're bringing up lots of great things that I haven't thought about. They're obviously going to have so much data on Pool 1 and Pool 2 cards, right? Because everybody has those now. Everybody's played with them a ton. Even once you get to Pool 3, you're still 60-70% of your deck is mostly Pool 1 and 2 cards, right? So yeah, some of those cards like Baron Mordo, 1, not everybody's unlocked him. 2, probably not everybody's using him, right? So it's like they could say, oh, well, he's bad, he needs to be buffed. I mean, I agree with you. He needs to be buffed, right? But they're maybe just waiting. Okay, let's wait a few more weeks till more people unlock him and we see more data. And I think that's a good thing. I think they're using data a lot to make these decisions. And I think that's a good thing. I think that'll help the game to be healthy going forward. Shifting gears a little bit. I wanted to know, what websites. I know there's a couple of websites out there now. MarvelSnap.io, Snap.fan, Marvel Snap Zone. Have you used any of these websites to kind of keep up on Marvel Snap? Have you used their deck building tools? And if so, which ones have you used? Which ones have you enjoyed using?
Yeah, I've used, I think, all the 3 of them: Marvel Snap.io, Snap.fan, and MarvelSnapZone.com. The first one that launched, I guess, it was MarvelSnap.io. I used the deck building features there a lot from the start. Usually when I do a YouTube video, I build a deck there and then I link it on the description. That's when I most commonly use for that. But Snap.fan is great as well because you can upload your collection there. That's a really good feature of that website. You can go through the game files, upload some JSON files that you find there, and then you have all your collection and filter cards by your having them or not, and like deck build with them. So that's a really powerful feature as well. And Marvel Snap Zone, I use it to discover videos because they have like a video section where you see the deck list and you see the YouTube video with it, and that's a good place to find some deck lists as well.
Yeah,
and
that's
aside from that, like YouTube and Twitter and Twitch and Discord are also good places to find cool deck lists.
Yes, yeah, a lot of great content creators like yourself out there. That, yeah, I mean, I have found many a deck idea from watching other people, and I agree with you. I think Marvel Snap Zone with the video feature is a great thing, because I'll look at deck lists, but sometimes people include kind of a little paragraph explaining how to use the deck. Other times they don't. So sometimes I'm like, okay, I get the general idea, but I'm like, how do I really play this the most effectively, right? And obviously I can try it out and I can learn it myself, but sometimes it's nice to watch a video and you can kind of see, oh, this is what they did when they were losing, this is what they did when they were winning, and this is kind of how you play it around. And you've created a couple deck videos, which I think have done a good job of that, right? You kind of show a couple different matches playing and kind of how the deck works, and there's a lot of people creating that kind of content, which I think is very helpful for new players and for players that have been playing for the last couple of months. So
Yeah, there's just one thing. Shout out to the Mastering Snap Discord. That's a Discord server where people do a really good job on posting deck lists and making like some articles about what works and what doesn't, and why Jen Foster is not good with Mr. Negative. So yeah, check that Discord out. It's really good content as well.
No, that's a great point. I am in that Discord and I have found great deck ideas there as well. Definitely a good place to be if you want to kind of see what people are building and how they're building it. Well, really appreciate you being here, being part of this conversation. I think we've shared some good ideas about just kind of general deck building ideas, concepts, and kind of how you can do some of these things. But I wanted to turn it back over to you, Tobimaro. I want to know, you kind of gave an introduction at the beginning, but maybe just a couple more minutes. What are your overall impressions of the game? What are your hopes for the future? What would you like to see most either added or changed by the developers? Just where are you feeling with the game right now?
Yeah, like I was saying, I really enjoyed the game. I think the gameplay is top notch. I think it's best gameplay of any card game I've ever played. The randomness is put with good use. So on Hearthstone, maybe sometimes it felt too broken. Here it feels normal. It feels like part of the game. And with snap mechanics, you really average out the odds of you getting bad luck. So yeah, I think that they totally nailed it. It's awesome. The bad parts about the game is monetization. They don't know how to do that, right? Because they were just out of Nexus events being removed from the game. Let's see what they do to replace them. I think they handled it quite okay. Like the announcements from Ben Broad, communication, it's being transparent and clear. So I have hopes for the future. Another thing I kind of worried about is the amount of content. So I think the game like this really needs more content. Being it leaderboards, new game modes, new cards, something to play for. Because right now, the only thing that makes me play the game are the dailies, the missions. I don't have anything to play for. I can deck build, I can have some fun, but at the end of the day, I really wished we still had the leaderboards from last season, for example. If we had like friend matches where we could play some tournaments, I would really enjoy a competitive scene around the game. Those are the things that I want most, and I think they should pump out more content quickly. I think, well, it's not a priority right now. I understand that, but the interest in the game, I think it's fading a bit. And I think that's a problem of many games, that if they can't keep up with delivering content every week or every 2 weeks, I think they can suffer.
Yeah. No, that's a very fair point. I agree with you. I think obviously Nexus events left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. But like you said, and as we talked about in the introduction, Ben Brode announced that they're pulling out Nexus events. They're going to completely wipe them. I didn't expect that. I expected them just to make some tweaks in the next week or two, but keep it. But they've kind of just ripped it out, and I think they're kind of starting over from scratch of what other ways can they use for card acquisition and monetization, which I think is great. I think that's a great shot, a great display of them listening to the user base. So I think that has restored some faith. I think people I've been talking to, other content creators, I think people are feeling more positive after that change, right? And I think that will help the longevity of the game. But I agree with you. I think what I have to continually remind myself is, okay, it's in beta, which in a lot of ways it feels like it's like released, right? Because we've been playing it so much and for so long now. But it's in beta. There's still, I'm sure, lots of features, lots of modes, lots of functionality to come. But the hope is that they can kind of incrementally continue to add things. Okay, let's add the leaderboard in its official form in the game. Let's add friend lists, etc. Right? I hope that doesn't take 6 months. I hope that's like maybe one thing in August, right? 1 or 2 things in August added, and then another 1 or 2 things in September, right? They can kind of just build as they go, because I think that will just keep everyone excited, obviously, as we eventually get to a global release, which I think will help the growth and sustainability of the game when you add a huge influx of more players to the game.
Yeah, and also more events, like meaningful events, because like this week or the previous one we got like the Thor and Friends, or what's the name of that event where you have like a scrapbook?
I
This
don't even
kind of
remember.
event.
Yeah.
So things that are not like that, because you don't have any, you can't do anything on that event. You just see stats that are not even useful. And I think that I imagine that they took a bit of development time to do something like that. I just wish that they focus on making better stuff around gameplay and tournament mode and stuff like that.
Yes. And my hope, obviously, we don't know, we can't see into what they're doing, but my hope is that they have teams working on those things. And I would assume they are. I mean, anytime somebody's asked about friend lists, tournament stuff, leaderboards, said, we're planning to do this. We'd love to do this. We're going to do this, right? We know they're going to come. It's just a matter of when, right? But Tobimaro, I just want to thank you again. Really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate the conversation. I've enjoyed your content. And I'm glad that we were finally able to have you on. Before we go, I just want to give you a moment. Just tell the listeners how they can find you, where they can follow you online, and how they can best support the content that you're creating.
Yeah, okay. Before that, I just want to thank you again. It was really, really good to be able to talk about this and to be on the podcast. So thanks again. About what I do, I stream on Twitch every weekend, on Fridays and Saturdays mostly, and some weekdays, some weeks more than the others, on twitch.tv/Tobimaro Games. I also make YouTube videos about deck lists that I find interesting, or data mine stuff. Like if you want to know more about the possible tournament mode that's coming to the game, check that out on youtube.com/Tobimaro Games. And I'm also on Twitter. I'm using it more lately at twitter.com/Tobimaro Games.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I saw your Twitter today. You pulled a pretty awesome variant that I'm very jealous of. So thank you again for being here.
One. It's incredible.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's a great card. It's awesome. Thank you again for being here. Listeners, thank you for listening as always. We appreciate you coming back time and time again to listen to the podcast and to give us your feedback. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at can't_stop_snap to let us know your opinions about the game. Let us know your thoughts about today's episode and the things we discussed, what things you wish we would have talked about, and we can cover those in another episode in the future. And thank you for listening. We look forward to putting out another episode soon for you to listen to, and we will talk to you in that next episode. Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, produced, recorded, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening.